On this day in Tudor history, the 13th of November 1537, England mourned its queen. Jane Seymour, the third wife of Henry VIII and the mother of his long-awaited son, was laid to rest at St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. Her death 12 days after giving birth to Prince Edward, the future Edward VI, had plunged the court into grief. And as Queen Consort, her funeral was one of majesty, ritual and deep symbolism. The final farewell to the woman that Henry VIII called his true and loving wife. I'm historian and author Claire Ridgway, and let me tell you more about Jane's burial. Jane Seymour's body had begun its final journey the day before, travelling by chariot from Hampton Court Palace to Windsor. It was no simple carriage ride, it was a grand and solemn procession, with black-clad mourners, banners of arms, torches and heralds leading the way. At Windsor, her coffin was taken into St George's Chapel, where a special service was held and a solemn night watch kept beside her body. Chroniclers described the atmosphere as one of deep reverence and splendour, the kind of ceremony reserved for a queen who'd given her life, as many saw it, in service to England and its dynasty. The next morning, the 13th of November, the chapel was filled with music and ritual. A solemn mass of requiem was sung by Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury. The Bishop of Worcester, Hugh Latimer, preached what contemporary accounts called a notable sermon. And Jane's eldest stepdaughter, the Lady Mary, acted as chief mourner. During the offertory, the great lords and ladies of the realm came forward, presenting rich palls of cloth of gold as offerings, a dazzling display of wealth and piety. After the Mass, there was a banquet in the castle for those who'd attended, a traditional part of royal funerals, not so much a celebration as a formal act of closure, a moment to honour the Queen who'd provided the Tudor dynasty with its longed-for male heir. But the mourning didn't end at Windsor. Back in London, the entire city joined in prayer for the Queen's soul. The chronicler Charles Risley recorded that in every parish church, a solemn mass of requiem was said, with all the bells ringing from 9 of the clock in the morning till noon. At St Paul's Cathedral, a great service was held with the mayor, aldermen, sheriffs and the wardens of every craft in the city. It must have been an extraordinary sound in London that day. Bells ringing out across the city, solemn chanting, the entire city pausing to mourn a woman they'd scarcely known, but whose death symbolised both triumph and tragedy. Jane was buried in the choir of St George's Chapel, the resting place that Henry VIII had chosen for himself, and indeed when he died in 1547 he was buried beside her, the only one of his 6 wives to share his tomb. But there's one more detail to Jane's burial that's often forgotten. Although her body lay at Windsor, her entrails and heart were interred elsewhere, at Hampton Court Palace in the Chapel Royal. A contemporary account describes the process. First, the wax chandler did his office, taking out the entrails with searing, balming, spicing and trammelling in cloth. Then the plumber leaded, soldered and chested, and her entrails were honourably interred in the chapel. It was common practice for royals and nobles. Separating the body and the heart allowed for multiple sites of remembrance, and it was also practical when bodies had to travel or lie in state. For Jane, Hampton Court Palace was fitting. It was where she'd given birth to Edward and where she'd died less than 2 weeks later. Jane Seymour's funeral was not just the end of a queen's life. It marked the closing of one brief shining chapter in Henry VIII's story. Jane had done what no other wife could, given him a surviving legitimate son, and for that, in Henry's eyes, she'd earned eternal honour. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this On This Day story, then please do like, subscribe and ring the bell so that you never miss one. And tell me in the comments, how do you think history would have been different if Jane Seymour had lived to raise her son? I'll see you soon. Bye bye.